Well, greetings and welcome. Jonathan Foust here. I am happy to be able to share this meditation and talk with you and hope you're thriving these days. Before we launch, our traditional thank yous to our producers, the Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo, for all the technical stuff that's going to bring this to you right now. Also, a huge thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting and streaming this, to my friends at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. Now there is a live class happening in a watch party with my talk every 4 weeks or something like that. And this wouldn't be happening without a huge thank you to our mindful movement leader, to Rita Moran. Thank you for leading. And to our mindful dialogue leaders, to Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy. The Monday night extravaganza starts at 6:30 Eastern Standard. Mindful movement with Rita to help you get settled into preparing for this meditation and this talk. And afterward, an incredible opportunity to connect with like-minded people facilitated by the incomparable Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy. That happens after this. Those links are on my website, on my Facebook page. They're both Zoom links before and after. And we're all offering this freely. The whole idea here is no one's denied access to these practices and teachings. And while it's offered with love and creativity and generosity, your generosity keeps the cycle going. So thank you for any support you can offer. I appreciate that. Also, just to let you know that I need to turn off my notifications. The advantage here of doing this thing live without stopping. I have a newsletter. You can sign up for my newsletter. I share my best photos of the month, as well as summary of talks and upcoming events and stuff like that. And speaking of upcoming events, in April, I am going to be leading a day-long called Every Breath is Sacred. And it's about breathing techniques that can change your state and absolutely will impact your meditation practice. It's a practice-based retreat. It's great. I really welcome you to join us for that. That's happening in April. More on my newsletter and stuff like that. Also on my website. Okay, that's it. Let's start with a short meditation. As we are talking about working with unpleasant sensation, working with pain, the different strategies, attentional compassion strategies, let's do a little bit where we're really focusing on the body. So if you like, take a moment to close your eyes and just sense, how does your body want to move? Take a few moments. Let your body move and stretch in any way and just kind of sense from the inside out. As you sense what it's like from the inside out, how does your body want to move? Let yourself get settled, and we'll do one of my favorite ways of moving into meditation through contraction release. So if you like, you might bring your hands into fists. Tighten up your fists and just feel that tension. And then tighten up your forearms and then your biceps and your triceps. And then tighten up the shoulders. And if it's comfortable for you, you can inhale and hold the breath and squeeze. Focus on the contraction. This is your point of concentration. Could you tighten up a little bit more? And then when you're ready, consciously now relax and just track the movement from contraction to softening and to letting go and to sensing from the inside out. And then again, you can tighten up your fists, forearms, biceps, triceps, muscles around the shoulders. Draw your shoulders up toward your ears. Draw the navel in toward the spine. Focus on the contraction. Hold and squeeze. If it's comfortable for you, taking a long, deep inhalation. Hold the breath, and again, exaggerate the contraction. How intimately can you feel what's tight, and could you tighten a little more? And when you're ready, again, consciously now move from contraction to relaxation, to softening, to letting go, and to feeling. What could relax? What could let go right now? One more time. Feel your open palms, and now bring your palms into fists. Tighten up the fists, the forearms, the biceps and triceps, muscles around the shoulders. Draw the shoulders up toward the ears. Draw the navel in toward your spine. Pull all the muscles of your face up toward the tip of your nose. Turn your face into a raisin and hold the breath. Hold and squeeze. Feel the contraction. And if you're holding your breath, when you're ready, slowly let go. Shoulders falling away from the ears, softening, relaxing down the length of the arms. Releasing, letting go in the belly. Letting your face relax and soften. With your eyes closed, just take a few moments now just to relax and soften and feel. At its most intimate level of meditation, there's a quality of inner receptivity, of just receiving the breath as it's happening. And receiving the sounds as they're happening. And you might sense right now, is there anything that could relax on the inside? You might sense in particular the inside of the mouth, the weight of the tongue. You might sense the belly. And from the inside out, the palms, the soles of the feet and the heels, softening, relaxing, releasing. The sense of arriving in the moment, in the here and now. And you might, in your own time, let your attention move toward an anchor, toward a particular focal point. For many, it's the breath. Some like to use the sound vibrations as they're happening. Some really like the feeling in the palms. And you might just select just one of these anchors, one that feels interesting for you. And explore now, over these next few minutes, experiencing it from the inside out, with both this lens of deep relaxation and receptivity, and at the same time, a quality of alertness. Relaxed and alert, and sensing from the inside out. When the mind drifts as it naturally will, smile, invite it back. You might notice this distinction between the mind with its narrative, generating thoughts in the past and future, the story, the whole cognitive process, as opposed to the experience on the inside. And you might explore over these next 3 breaths, how much more can you relax and soften and feel from the inside, right at the point of your anchor. And you might sense the object of your attention, the experience of the breath on the inside. But also you might inquire, who is it that's observing? What is this awareness that is aware of the experience on the inside? And you might sense, is it possible to feel from the inside the breath or sound or the feeling in the palms without adding any story, without adding any sense of good or bad, just to experience the raw data of sensation, just for the next 3 breaths. And you might explore now, letting go of all technique. How much more could you relax and soften and feel on the inside? Dropping any sense of effort, but receiving the moment exactly as it is. When you're ready, you can deepen your breath. And you might stretch and move in any way that feels good. Open the jaw wide, let out any sounds. Take this time for your transition. Welcome. Many, many years ago now, I was in the Peace Corps and I lived in Niamey, Niger, the capital of Niger in West Africa. And the Peace Corps kind of gave me this big house. It was a kind of a weird, I think it once been a warehouse or something. And, um, and I lived right down the street. It was very interesting. I lived right now the Palais du Congrès on a dirt road. It was like a dirt road 1 block away from where the Congress met. And I was right down the street from the Sûreté Nationale, where people would have to check in before they they took off to either cross the desert or after they crossed the Sahara. So I met a lot of very, very interesting people. And in fact, at one time, I met someone because I had this big house and I didn't own anything. It was easy for me to kind of invite people to stay and um, take a shower and um, get ready for the next leg of their journey. Um, Sometimes I would be waving goodbye to someone, and then someone would be driving up. They'd see me waving, and they just pull over, and then they would stay for a couple days. It was a fascinating experience. I really loved it, and there were three people who somehow I encountered. They were British volunteers, and they had been living in Malawi, I believe. And they were driving all the way back to England, and one was going on to Scotland. And they were about to cross the Sahara Desert in their Volkswagen van. And they stayed at my place for about a week. And I noticed this one fellow, Richard, had a lot of scars on his shoulders and his chest. His face seemed fine, but it was pretty clear that something horrific had happened to him, and I never asked until one day he told me the story. He was visiting another British volunteer who was, and they lived up in the mountains, who was studying gorillas at a really, really distant location. And he went to stay with her for a couple of weeks. And he was working on her propane stove, which is just like a propane tank with a burner on top. And it hadn't been working, so he was fixing it. And when he lit it, the entire thing blew up, like just blew up and exploded. You know, he was crouched over it. So his whole front of his body and his face, the top of his head was completely roasted. They were so far away from anything that the person who he was visiting said, "I don't have anything to give you except for this tranquilizer, which I give for the gorillas, but it's never been tested on humans." But they had no choice. So she gave him this tranquilizer, which completely, he said, really put him out in a pretty psychedelic way. And they started this long trek to the hospital. This hospital, it was a rural hospital, it was run by nuns. And they bandaged him up and they dressed his wounds, and he was bedridden for a long, long time, just immobilized. And at one point, as he told the story, and one of the interesting things was when they removed the bandages, for some reason his face was completely fine, but his scalp and the rest of him was heavily scarred. But because he had been in bed for I don't know how long, it was a long, long time. He wasn't able to move. The nuns just announced one morning, "Hey, if you want breakfast, you're going to have to go get it in the cafeteria." And because he was so immobilized and so much pain, he just couldn't believe it. And he said, "Well, I'm just not going to eat, until they see the pain I'm in and they bring me some food." But they refused to bring him any food. And he said when he first started to move and he had to go all the way to the cafeteria under his own power, he crawled. Boy, I tear up just thinking about this. He said he would crawl, crying and swearing at them, and he would just have to stop and rest and just sort of sleep until he had enough strength to continue on to the cafeteria. And he said he swore at them, he cursed them up and down, and eventually he started to gain more and more strength. And he just said, as he told me this story, he just had tears, pouring down his face. He said, those nuns saved my life. He said, they were tough. He said, that was the toughest love I've ever experienced. That story kind of brings me to what I'd like to explore a little bit with you here, which is this whole idea of exploring pain. And I like focusing mostly on physical pain, but it's not related. It can also be related to emotional pain as well. How do we draw on compassion And how do we draw on wisdom? How do we find the balance between compassion practices and wisdom practices? And wisdom is, hey, you're in pain, you're not moving your muscles, get out there and move. That can be pretty brutal. And if the nuns had done that prematurely, he could have really damaged himself. Compassion practices, I see your pain, let me bring you food for the rest of your life. Compassion without wisdom is like an enabling. We don't allow someone to really learn their lessons, to do the work that they need to do. So finding this balance between wisdom and compassion is really fascinating. So a couple questions I'd like to explore, like, what is the balance of compassion and wisdom when it responds to working with your pain? How does widening the lens of compassion change your experience? And how does this whole strategy of meeting pain with compassion actually change your experience of pain? And finally, if we have time, what does working actively and consciously with pain teach you about the nature of reality? For a lot of years, I lived near the Appalachian Trail. And a number of years ago, I thought, I'm just going to do a section hike. Now, when you walk the Appalachian Trail, there's a hierarchy, I found out, that the elite, like the top of the food chain, are the through hikers. The ones who are hiking from Georgia to Maine or Maine to Georgia, like they're the top dogs. Then you have the section hikers. Okay, I'm going to do 5 days, this piece and this piece. And then the bottom, everyone looks down on the day hikers, these wimps who are just out there for a couple hours. So I found all this out meeting through hikers and section hikers on the trail. There's a story, you may have heard a version of this story, kind of a classic thing, is when you're a through hiker, you are hungry all the time. You're just starving because you're just walking. And I heard this one story of this guy who would buy tubes of mayonnaise, and he would just walk with a tube in each hand, shooting mayonnaise into his hands. But anyway, the story is a day hiker is making his soup, and a fly lands in his soup. And, sadly, he looks at it and he pours his soup out. The section hiker has his soup, and soup lands, and, he takes a spoon and he takes the fly out of the soup and he keeps eating his soup. The through hiker, fly lands in his soup, and she grabs the fly and says, spit it out. So I did want to share that. Just thinking about this story reminded me of what it's like to be on the AT. But the story goes like this, that this fellow is hiking the Appalachian Trail with his dog, as a lot of people do. He's out in the middle of nowhere, and he severely stubs his toe. He may have broken his toe. He's out there by himself with only him and his dog. He's miles from getting any help. And as he's limping along, he's just thinking, what an idiot. I have miles to cover today before I get to my next food drop, and it was so stupid. And he goes on, trying to walk and ignoring it, and just getting more and more caught in self-aversion. This, of course, is the trauma reaction. It's how we react to when things don't go our way, anger and judgment and blame. And then suddenly a thought occurred to him, and he thought, wait a minute, what if this happened to my dog? Would I be this angry with her? And suddenly he realized he had another way of dealing with this. And he thought, what if I treated myself as I would treat my dog? And suddenly a new world opened up for him, a world of compassion and empathy, taking time to rest, to kind of care for it. I meet a fair number of people, and I certainly have experienced for myself that when I'm in pain, it's very hard to tap into compassion. I'll talk about that in a moment. But one way to begin to access compassion is to imagine that you are holding your pain as if another that you really care for was experiencing it. And if you can't hold your experience of pain or discomfort with compassion, could you hold it for yourself in a way that you would for another? This is just one of these doorways to explore how to tap into pain. I've been exploring a bunch of awareness tools for working with pain, different ways of changing the frame of like zooming in, zooming out, exploring where you don't feel it, the sense of titration and pendulation, lots of attentional strategies that are enormously helpful. But I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the compassion strategies. And again, you may have noticed it's very, very difficult to bring compassion to yourself when you're in pain. We just fall massively short on empathy when it comes to ourselves. We're kind of trained out of it. You may have noticed that when it comes to receiving compassion, there are these kind of core beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Or the big one, if I just ease up on myself, I'm going to get soft. If I take it easy on myself, I'm going to stop trying. Well, this becomes a really interesting thing to explore. The fundamental questions in mindfulness, the wisdom question, or like the reality-based question is, what exactly is happening right now? What exactly is happening? That brings you in contact with, okay, so this is it. This is what's present. These are the cards I'm dealt with right now. And there are a variety of other questions that open up the compassion, which is one of my favorites is, how does this want me to be with it right now? How does this dull ache want me to be with it? What does it need right now? That question is a direct invitation to change your relationship to the unpleasant sensations. No one wants to have tea with pain. We all want to nuke it. We all want to just make it go away. But if we live an unexamined life, then we're locked into a world of finite possibilities. When you can bring mindfulness to your discomfort, that is to say, cultivating non-judging awareness, that's when new possibilities open up. That's when you're with pain, you can begin to open into a new relationship with what's here. Another question I often ask myself or ask when I'm with another who's struggling, and you might just Zen pop quiz. You can close your eyes, only if you're not driving. And just take a moment just to kind of sense, is there somewhere inside that you feel some unpleasant sensation? And if you can't find any unpleasant sensation, just notice where you feel a sensation that's really predominant right now. And let yourself just explore the following question. What happens inside if you hold this in some kind of loving presence, some kind of compassion, empathy, or kindness right now? What happens inside? And if you like, you can open your eyes. Maybe you felt a little shift. I hope you may have felt some kind of a little shift there. What I find is I get really locked out of compassion when I'm in pain, as do many. And again, we have these core beliefs around not deserving, or sometimes if I bring compassion to this, it's going to get bigger. It's going to take over. It's often a big thing. But a couple other questions, but I found really helpful. Like when I'm really struggling, when I'm really in pain, and I can locate it, when I have that somatic sense of its location, I'll just ask, what if I just dribble a few drops of compassion? How does it move or shift or change? Or what if I just offered 5% of my compassion or kindness right now? What might move or shift or change on the inside? And I find that to be really interesting because sometimes that when I just sense, okay, I'm not going to love this up totally, but let me give it 5% and see what happens. And I just track its effect. Oftentimes that will initiate some shift. And sometimes 5% is manageable. It's like, okay, I can try 5%. I'm not going to go for 100%. I don't even know what that means. When you don't have access to compassion, the percentage of cultivating a shift really goes down. When you can in some way, and you've got to figure out how to do it, your percentage goes way up. I was thinking about this percentage thing, and I just flashed on a movie with Jim Carrey, Dumb and Dumber actually, where he's in love with this beautiful woman, and he says, "So what are the chances of us, hooking up?" And she says, "Not good." And he says, "Like 1 out of 100?" And she goes, "No, more like 1 out of 1,000,000." And he says, "I hear you. So you're telling me there's a chance." So why am I sharing this line with you? It's a great line. But it also points toward like staying open to possibilities. 1 out of 1,000,000, there's a chance. And what I find is that when we open the frame, when we really spend time exploring compassion and what blocks you from compassion, you may notice, as I do, that when I'm in pain, I get small. I go into self-preservation. I get really self-absorbed. It's me against the world. And again, when I'm referring to my pain, I'm often referring to my most constant and consistent pain, which is chronic migraines, which again are happily much, much less. But I struggled with this because I found it hard when I was paralyzed, literally paralyzed by pain. Accessing compassion seemed a million miles away. No way I could do it. And then I became aware of the practice of Tonglen. And in essence, there are lots of ways to describe Tonglen. I'll go into it in a little more detail, but here's how I like to think of it. It's simply recognizing that whatever you feel, other people feel too. I remember the first time when I really tried that on. And again, I'm kind of locked up. It's painful to blink. And I'm just aware of my pain. All my strategies are failing. And I just said to myself, other people feel this too. And an interesting shift occurred. There is a widening of my awareness, kind of an acknowledging of other people who share this misery. And I thought, well, how many people on this planet right now might be actually feeling what I'm feeling? Maybe worse, maybe a little less. What I noticed is when I did that, something connected to something bigger than me, the small, tight, restricted, self-preservational self expanded. And it's not like the pain got smaller. The space got bigger. And I got really curious about this. So I Googled, half of the world's population suffers from headaches. And every single day, 1 in 6 people has a headache. 1 in 6 people, that's 135 million people every day have a headache. And half of them have pain bad enough to be considered a migraine. So half of 135 million people every day have a migraine. Wow. I don't like being sick. When I have a cold, I'm just horrible. I just get miserable. So any given day, 2 to 11% of the world's population has a cold. That's between 156 to 740 million people every day on the planet have a cold. It's a stunning way to bring your living reality into a sense of how it fits in the larger context. Connecting up to this shared network of this human experience. So, of course, we have to try this on. If you like, you can close your eyes. And you might take 3 slow and full deep breaths right now. And I'd like to invite you to bring your awareness to a moment of pain in your life. It could be physical pain, emotional pain. Not to dwell on it too much, but just take a few moments to kind of just recall the memory of what that felt like inside. And as you make contact with it, just explore the following phrase. Other people feel this too. And let your attention sort of open, and I'll shut up in a moment. Let your attention open to connect how many other people on the planet might either have felt that or be feeling that right now. And just track whatever might move or shift or change on the inside. And now, if you would, bring into mind a moment of joy, just a memory of a time of feeling joyous, feeling happy. Take a few moments, let yourself settle on a memory. And you might take a few breaths and sense if you can access the physical, the kinesthetic memory of what that felt like inside and bring it into the here and now. And then again, explore the phrase, other people feel this too. And just feel or imagine how many people have either felt or feel that feeling right now. And track whatever might move or shift or change. We'll take the next few moments. And as you're ready, you might deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. And just sense what shifts for you when you try on this practice. For me, there's this sense of I'm not alone. That my experience is actually a shared experience. That the suffering that I might feel is part of a collective suffering. And the joy that I feel is part of the human experience. Opening the frame can be a powerful way. And I like to think of it as like it's a reality practice. The truth is, other people do feel this too. That's true. And when we open to the reality of that, something shifts. This practice of Tonglen is it's really interesting. There are lots of different variations of how to practice it, but in essence, the translation of Tonglen, as I understand it, is called taking and sending. Taking and sending. In essence, on the in breath, you're sort of taking in the suffering. On the out breath, you're sending whatever will benefit as you breathe out. So it's something that you can do personally for yourself, just to like breathe in the pain, acknowledge the pain, and then on the exhalation, send out whatever might be a benefit. And of course, that will vary, but it just simply might be, breathing in, acknowledging the pain, and as you exhale, just saying, I care about this, or I see this, or maybe it's about relaxing or softening around it. Maybe it's just that memory of I've gone through this before. I can go through it again. Whatever that may be. So this is considered a practice of liberation for yourself. Seeing the suffering and then offering whatever may be of benefit. You can do this as a formal meditation practice, or you can simply do it informally, in any moment, just 3 breaths, just seeing it. I see this, I feel this, I acknowledge the suffering. May I offer whatever may be of benefit. It can also be a practice of liberation for others, where you can widen your awareness to the suffering of the world. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But we tend to look away when we see or we experience pain. That's the natural phenomena. Who wants to turn towards suffering? And yet, it's a practice of liberation. It's awakening the heart. Bodhicitta is the awakened heart and the awakened mind. It's seeing the reality of suffering, but also awakening that quality of heart, that quality of presence that can hold the suffering. Sometimes this practice is taught with visualization, where you might, as you sort of feel your suffering, you can breathe in, maybe it's darkness or heat or a color. Visualization might help you get in contact with that. As you exhale, you might offer light or ease, or maybe a kind of a different color. Traditionally, you kind of start with yourself, and then you can expand out. Now, it's really important to say that many techniques, most techniques have some contraindications. And this practice is not for the faint of heart. If you have kind of underlying trauma, if when you turn your attention toward pain and suffering, and there's a tendency to feel flooded or overwhelmed, this may not be a good practice, or you might regulate it in some way. And if you do feel yourself kind of overwhelmed and flooded, you can either let the technique fall away or bring your attention to somewhere inside where you don't feel activated. It might be the tip of your nose or your earlobes or the palms of your hands, and kind of let that be your refuge. Keep your awareness there as your anchor. That can be a helpful way to kind of move through it. Many people feel overwhelmed when they open to the pain and suffering, particularly when they expand it to the suffering of the world. So it's important to stay grounded. But part of the reality is that you are awareness itself. That you are that ground of reality that has this capacity to hold the 10,000 sorrows and the 10,000 joys of life. So let's do a short practice, just to kind of sense this. If you like, you might close your eyes. And you might take 3 slow breaths as a way to kind of open into the sense of the here and now. Softening on the out breath. And you might just sense inside, is there somewhere where you feel some discomfort, some unpleasant sensation? It can be helpful, let's say just for this practice, to focus on any kind of like physical discomfort. And if you don't feel any physical discomfort, just focus on somewhere where you've got a dominant sensation. And as you feel the breath, as you breathe in, kind of acknowledging this pure sensation of here and now. And as you exhale, offering whatever may be a benefit. So you're seeing it on the in-breath. You're sensing what it needs and offering that on the out-breath. We'll do this just for a few moments, a few rounds of breath. Acknowledging the sensation. Offering what may be a benefit on the out-breath. On the in-breath, clear seeing and wisdom. On the out-breath, loving presence. Notice what may have shifted just in these few moments of practice. And if you like, you can deepen your breath. I hope you found that helpful. It's just a little taste. We'll explore more of this down the road because it can be such a powerful practice of awakening bodhicitta, the capacity to see clearly and the capacity to hold what you find. So I've got a dear friend, and I sent him an email asking him about how he works with pain, and I'll call him Peter because that's his name. Peter, I put him in the category of a true maniac for God, utterly devoted to awakening. Peter's in his early 80s. He was a ski jumper, a yogi, a long distance, open water ocean swimmer, and a grab life by the gonads kind of guy. And we've just known each other for decades and decades. And he's old. I don't think Peter would argue that one. But he asked him about his pain levels. And quite often when you go to the hospital, they ask you they have a pain scale. And so here's what he took me through. He said, at this point in his life, 0, he said, very unusual to have no pain, even at night. Whenever it happens, I'm grateful. Pain level 1 to 3, mild discomfort. I barely even think about it. At the dentist, maybe a CT scan or MRI, and I'm curious about the procedure, and I talk to the technician, so I actually have a good time. Pain level 4 to 6, moderate discomfort. For example, surgery with multiple needles to provide lidocaine. I distract myself by focusing on another part of my body. Maybe I'll sink my fingernails into my hands. The after effects, take some Tylenol, I go to bed. And I just remember what my father said, stiff upper lip. What pain? I either minimalize it or I laugh hysterically. Pain level 7 to 9. I experience this level of pain every day. hip pain, arthritic pain in my hands, overall pain when walking, climbing steps. Solution, a glass of Chardonnay. I find this level of pain as a way of wearing me down over time when constant. Breathing helps. Level 10. I've only experienced this a few times. After surgery, it's wildly intense without letting up. And I seek relief by whatever means possible. Strong painkillers, breathe into the pain, yell, scream, all methods go out the window. And he went on to say in his email, most of us imagine that we'll have the same pain-free, illness-free body once we get into our 80s and 90s. That's why we want to live forever. It's part of the grand deception. We're sure we won't be the ones in a wheelchair with an IV drip in our arm and in constant pain, looking like a ghost, smelling of decay. But bodies, like cars, don't last 100 years. And he has an image that he shares of this race car completely smashed up. And when I read his email about his experience of pain at this time in his life, my heart was in my throat. I did not know he was in such pain. We go for regular walks, and Peter carries on like a stoic. He is not a complainer. But I noticed how, from myself, when I really took in the level of pain he's working with, how much it touched my heart. And I want to offer a short reflection and just a few more comments before I close. You might take a moment and just close your eyes. And again, you might take 3 slow breaths. Let yourself soften on the out-breath. And bring your attention, if you will, to someone right now who you know is suffering or going through a hard time. You might visualize them, just call their presence in the here and now, and just notice what is your heart's response to their suffering. And you might even sense with your breath, as you breathe in, acknowledging, seeing the suffering. On the out-breath, offering whatever may be a benefit. And can you imagine now, as you explore with the breath, breathing in the suffering, acknowledging it, seeing it as it is, and on the exhalation, offering what may have benefit. Can you include yourself? Can you open that to all beings? Sensing in your own way the 10,000 sorrows of this human journey. Acknowledging as well the 10,000 joys of your capacity for joy, for love, for kindness, for compassion, for steadiness. And you might, in your own way, wish yourself well. Imagine your path opening with a greater sense of ease and well-being. And in your own way, imagining yourself with an ever increasing capacity for happiness, for peace. And if you wish, imagine if just for a moment that you could offer that out to all beings without exception. May all beings increase their capacity for happiness. May all beings increase their capacity to feel safe. May all beings increase their capacity to feel free from stress and suffering. If you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. Thank you for your time and attention. Pain, stress, suffering is all part of the human condition. Our natural response is to turn away, to nuke it, to make sure it never comes back. And yet it can become a portal. And the portal is about coming into a deeper understanding of reality. That's the beauty of this practice that I love about this practice. It's not optimistic, it's not pessimistic, it's realistic. And the attentional strategies when it comes to pain and suffering can be incredible. And I have more to share, which is pretty exciting stuff. How you place your attention changes your experience of the here and now. But these compassion strategies are equally, if not more important, for finding a way to stay open to reality, particularly when we're in times of struggle and pain. Thank you again. I wish you so well. I appreciate your time and attention, and may your capacity for joy, your capacity for compassion and empathy continue to expand exponentially. Take good care.